Hey audio friends, MrAyrit here, welcome back to the channel. Got a unique review for you today with an amp that I don't think many people have had a chance to hear, and that's a shame. What I've got today is the Eddie Current ZDT Jr. And so we'll talk a little bit about this guy. I mean, I don't think you can buy it brand new anymore, but you know, I'd say this is one to keep your eye open on the used market. So why this amp is special is because it is a transformer coupled tube amp. Now, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I couldn't explain to you the nuances of, you know, what that architecture looks like, but let's just say it's not a hybrid tube amp, and it's not an OTL tube amp, okay? But this transformer coupled way of making a tube amp, it basically allows it just a little more flexibility and allows it to play better with a wider range of headphones, where like an OTL tube amp might only play well with higher impedance stuff. This can do everything, including like hard to drive planar magnetic headphones that are low impedance. So for instance, I've got the HE6 SEV2 that I've used on this, and it sounds fantastic, okay? And so what we'll do is we'll talk about this guy. I'm gonna go ahead and drop a link to my buddy Singxer video that he released not too long ago that talks about these different tube architectures, and he goes into a little more detail and things about that. So this is really going to be just a review of the Eddie Current ZDT Jr, but then it's also going to be, I'll throw in like a little bit of comparison to something like the Valley 2, and then also to my Quicksilver amp, which is also a transformer coupled tube amp. So let's just take a quick tour of the unit, shall we? And you know, it's a relatively simple amp. You got a nice big toggle switch on the front, nice big volume knob, feels pretty good. You know, it's nothing too crazy special though. You've got 2 1/4-inch outs, which can be used at the same time if you want, although I'm not sure that I'd recommend that. But you've got a low impedance and a high impedance, and so it's really nice because you can just kind of pop them out and switch between the two if you want, and see, you know, which one your headphones kind of match up with the best. You can see it's chunky, but it's not crazy heavy or anything like that. It's nothing like the Quicksilver, because the Quicksilver is like an absolute beast that weighs like 20 pounds. This is maybe like 5 pounds or something like that, so it's not crazy. The build feels okay. It has RCA in, and it has RCA pass-through, which I appreciate because the Quicksilver does not have that, so that's kind of in this guy's favor. And then it uses just a regular kind of PC power cable down there. As far as tubes go, it uses some different tubes that you don't normally see on maybe higher end amps. So for instance, the power tubes here are, or at least I think they're the power tubes, maybe they're the input tubes, I get those confused, but these little guys, these are like the, what are they, 5654s. So I had several different types of these. I had Mollards, I had Vox hoods, and I've got like the GE Riverstone ones. But ultimately, I just think that the stock tubes, whatever they are, sounded better than the rest of those. I thought all the rest of those were a little smoothed over, you know, and I didn't think that they had quite as much detail as the stock ones do. The back tube here, the larger one, is a, let me just double check on that. So the back ones here are 6N24Ps, or it looks like 6FC7 or ECC89s. Now, I really haven't been able to find any of those to roll, otherwise I would have tried them out, but I just haven't been able to find any. The smaller tubes are a little bit easier to find, but there's still not that big of a variety. So I don't know, as far as I'd dump a whole bunch of money into tube rolling with those smaller tubes. Like I said, the stock ones sounded the best to me. I'll have to see if I can eventually find something to replace the larger ones and play around with those a little bit. As far as power goes, it doesn't really give me any power numbers on this. It does say that the low impedance output is for 32 to 100 ohm headphones, and then the high impedance is for 100 to 600 ohm headphones. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say this thing has plenty of power. Again, I'm not sure exactly how much it's putting out, but I was listening, like I said, to the HE6 SEV2s, and I thought they sounded really good on this. So I don't think you have to really have a whole lot of concerns about power output. So let's talk a little bit about just the sound of this amp in general, and I think to do that, like, I need to pull an analogy out. And I was thinking about this, and I'm going to say like a woodworking analogy, right? So think about solid state, like in a very rough sense of the term. Now, understand that all amps sound a little bit different, and you know, this isn't a perfect analogy, but just if I'm thinking about the gear that I've had on hand, so I just did the Schiit Mjolnir review, but I also have my Valley 2, and then I've got this guy, and then I've got my Quicksilver, so we're going to kind of go through those. So if the Schiit Mjolnir is like a piece of wood, think of it as, you know, it's got a little bit of detail, whatever it is that we're talking about here. Let's call it just like a bench or something, okay? Let's say there's a slight amount of detail, nothing too crazy, and there's been maybe one pass over with sandpaper to kind of smooth things out, and then just one little coat of sealer or finish on it, right? It's still pretty rough. It's not very refined. It's not very intricate. Okay, there hasn't been a ton of craftsmanship that's gone into this bench. Enter the Valley 2, and I would say, you know, take that same bench and sand it a little bit more. Okay, so things are just rounded a little bit more. There's still the same amount of detail roughly, but it's just they're a little bit more refined, a little bit more rounded off, right? When we step up to something like the Eddie Current ZDT Jr., now you've added more detail, but you've also sanded a little bit more. You spent a little more time refining. You put maybe another coat of finish on it to make it just look that much better, right? And then if you think about stepping up to the Quicksilver amplifier, you're talking more detail added, again, more sanding, more refinement, and then, you know, more polish on top. And that's kind of like my stepping stones here with these different amplifiers. What I would say you're getting when you start diving into this transformer coupled tube amps, as far as I can tell, I've only tried these two, right? Is you get a good amount of detail, but what really is impressive is the way that the notes are kind of smoothed off. Like, you still get the same amount of detail or more, but they have like a nice round tone to them, you know, that they just feel finished and complete, which gives them a really natural sound, I think, really organic sound. And there isn't like the same kind of harshness and stuff that you can get with solid states or even hybrid tube amplifiers. And what this allows me to do is dive a little bit more into the nuance of the tracks, the spatial information of the tracks, which I really enjoy, especially with live music. I think this is really, really apparent. Of course, it all kind of depends on the recordings and things like that. But in general, I feel like there's rarely a time where I was going back and forth between like the Valley 2 and the Eddie Current ZDT Jr, regardless of headphones, that I thought the Valley 2 was better. Is it a lot worse? No, not really, but it doesn't quite have the convincing, you know, space and organicness to notes that the Eddie Current ZDT does. In the same vein as that, I brought it down here to my main desk so I could go back and forth between the Quicksilver and the Eddie Current ZDT, and I think kind of similarly, there's not really any times where I've did that with any headphones where I thought that the Eddie Current really outperformed the Quicksilver. It sounds slightly different. It's a little bit smoother than the Quicksilver. I feel like the Quicksilver is a little bit fuller, a little bit more exciting. But even when I'm just talking about kind of like the details and nuances of the tracks, I always prefer the Quicksilver, which is kind of a bummer for me because I was hoping I could maybe get away with just keeping the Eddie Current and selling the Quicksilver since that thing's so expensive. But just nothing beats it that I've found so far, for me anyway, for my preferences. So what I'm getting at though is the Eddie Current, if you can find one, is a great entry into this world of transformer coupled tube amplifiers, and I would highly recommend it. I actually traded my Felix Audio Echo for it, and I think that was a really good trade. Number one, those are pretty widely available, and number two, I just really prefer the way this thing sounds, and it can play with like all my headphones, which is really cool. So I'm a fan. Basically, my current setup is this guy is on my bedside table upstairs, and then my Quicksilver is down here at my main desk, but they're both being fed from RU6s. So I love both these amplifiers, and I hope I get to try some more transformer coupled tube amps in the future. What's your take on transformer coupled tube amps? Do you have one? Have you tried one? Did you feel like they kind of are the do-it-all holy grail of headphone amps? Because that's kind of where I'm at, and I know Signcraft pretty much feels the same way about that, I think. Shouldn't really speak for him, but he's the one that got me into trying these. So I really hope that I get to try some more. Certainly if you have impressions, drop those experiences down below. I always appreciate when people share that, and I just appreciate you being here and watching. So if you found this useful, you know, feel free to drop a like, and then maybe consider subscribing if you're interested in more headphone content, because I will definitely have more of that coming before too long. So thanks again for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.